Thank you.
Taoiseach, yesterday public sector workers dealt a body blow to your austerity agenda, with an overwhelming majority of unions saying no to Croke Park II. The truth of this matter is that the workers correctly calculated that this was an unfair deal. They recognised that it would be bad for public sector workers and their families, bad for the public services on which we all depend, and of course bad for the domestic economy. Our nurses, our teachers, our emergency service workers refused to be intimidated by Minister Howland's bully boy threats. And they've now sent you a very clear signal, Taoiseach. They're telling you that you've taken enough from them and they don't have any more to give. Can I say that the idea that you would suck £1 billion out of public services and not hurt the schools that educate our children or the hospitals that care for our sick family members was always absurd. Equally absurd is Minister Howland's claim that he will run out of money before the end of the year. Anyone with the wit to read the NTMA's exchequer balance figures knows that that is simply not true. Taoiseach, everyone knows that we have to address the deficit, but your approach is unfair and unworkable, and there are alternatives, Taoiseach. If you're so concerned about making payroll savings, well, tackle the issue of excessive pay at the top of the public and civil service. Get a real deal on generic drugs. Or why not a third tax rate on individual incomes over €100,000? Because these alternatives would raise the revenue you say you require to meet your Troika target. So, Taoiseach, will you respect, never mind reflecting or considering, will you respect the outcome of the union's vote on Croke Park II? Will you now withdraw your threat of an across-the-board cut of 7%? And finally, Taoiseach, will you go back to the drawing board and look at the alternatives to raise the revenues you say you require and come back with a deal that's fair? Fair to workers, fair to families and fair to the domestic economy.
Thank you. Taoiseach.
Well, what you propose again is complete and utter hypocrisy from what you put forward just a short time ago, of £3 billion of extra cuts in income tax, which would, as I said, be a lethal injection for the economy of this country, which would drive thousands and thousands of jobs out of our country. The Sinn Féin proposition for the economic development of this country is simply and utterly catastrophic. Now, 87% of public sector workers had their pay absolutely protected under the negotiations that were conducted here. And you'll be aware, Deputy McDonald, that 5% of income earners, that the top 5% of income earners pay 44% of tax at the moment. You asked a question from the Minister for Public Expenditure in February with your analysis that if everybody was capped at 100,000 to include local authorities and state agencies, what the outcome would be. The estimated net savings would be less than 110 million, which would give a marginal tax rate for a public servant of 100,000 per annum or higher is at least 62.5%. Now, you were asked last night, what were your alternatives? Well, you said you'd put on your thinking cap and that a 48% tax would bring in 300 million. I think you need to get a lot more thinking caps in that party, because what you are proposing would be the ruination of this country, the ruination of it. So government, as I said to Deputy Martin, will now consider the outcome of the ballot as announced by the LRC. We consider the truth of the bottom line expressed repeatedly by government and particularly by Minister Howland, whom we absolutely support in this, of achieving 300 million of extra savings from within payroll this year, amounting to 1 billion by 2015. That's absolutely necessary for the economic salvation and development of our country as we retrieve our economic sovereignty and as we go forward to improve public finances, to run the systems efficiently and to provide jobs for our people, and to protect and develop the very frontline services that you speak of, in respect of which we're borrowing in excess of €1 billion every month at the moment.
Thank you. Deputy MacDonald, 1 minute.
Well, Taoiseach, can I politely suggest to you that for the 426,000 people on the live register and the 1,600 people who emigrate every week, it is you and your administration that are delivering the so-called lethal injection. You've really showed your hand there in your response, because, you see, you won't countenance levying the burden on those that have more. You just won't do it. You won't look at the high earners in the public sector or the private sector. You just won't do it.
Sorry, please.
And Taoiseach, can I say to you, if you thought, or your colleagues thought for 1 second that middle and low-income workers in the public sector were a soft touch for your lethal injection, you got it very, very wrong.
Question, please.
Now, I suggest that you put on your thinking cap. That was my point last night, and I'm glad that you were tuned in. You're clearly adverse to any sort of thinking outside of the box. You need to find 300 million. We've given you concrete examples of where those monies can be raised. Go and find it.
Thank you.
But back off public sector workers who struggle to heat their homes and to pay their bills. That's the reality of what you have delivered so far. And could you please answer my questions? Are you going to back off the threat of the 7% cut across the board?
Deputy, would you please
yes,
put your question?
or no? Are you really going to respect the democratic verdict of the unions and their workers? Yes or no? Those are pretty clear-cut questions.
Thank you.
Which
Thank you. Would you zoom your
even you, Taoiseach, should be able to answer.
Taoiseach.
Well, as I said to you already, the government have a very clear fiscal programme set out here. That requires us to achieve 300 million of extra savings from within payroll this year, in 2013, amounting to 1 billion extra payroll savings by 2015. That's what the government have to deal with now. And the government will obviously consider the outcome of the ballot, and the government will make its decisions as to how those 300 million of extra savings can be achieved. The government's door is always open and has always been open to unions and their representatives to make their views known. And that was very extensive, very fulsome and very truthful in the discussions and the negotiations that took place under the direction of Minister Howland with the LRC and the trades unions. I'd repeat for you again, Deputy MacDonald, 87%, the overwhelming majority of public servants had their pay untouched by the proposals on the table. And for your information, and you're aware of this, but you won't say it. You won't recognise it. You won't recognise
Deputy
it.
MacDonald, you're the very one who demands silence when you're speaking. Would you allow a reply, please, now, without interruption?
As I said, 87% of public sector workers have their core salaries and core pay protected under the negotiations and the LRC proposals. And it's perfectly obvious that when you say, in your vision for the new Ireland, to tax those on higher levels out of existence, the Association of Higher Civil Servants voted overwhelmingly against this proposal simply because they were targeted by government for bigger contributions from higher salaries. So it is blatantly untrue for you to say that there is no focus and has been no focus on those who earn most to pay most. And as I said to you, the marginal rate with the marginal tax rate and the pension rate reduction for a person over 100,000 now is 62.5%. What you want to do is simply tax people out of existence with some vision of yours that that's going to sort out all our problems.
Thank you, Taoiseach.
The challenge now, Deputy McDonald, is to achieve 300 million extra savings this year. And let me reassure you, there's absolute unity of government in this matter and unity of purpose in government in achieving those extra savings.
Thank you.